Picture this. A 12-year-old girl standing in an airline's corporate boardroom, surrounded by men and women in expensive suits, their faces pale with concern. The girl adjusts her wire-rimmed glasses and speaks with a calm that doesn't match her age. "That flight attendant you're protecting? She humiliated a child. Your youngest first-class passenger. And it just so happens my family owns 40% of this airline's shares." The room goes silent. You can hear the executives shifting uncomfortably in their leather chairs. But to understand how we got here, to understand how a 12-year-old ended up confronting an entire corporation, we need to go back to the beginning. Her name was Rachel Sterling. 12 years old. Black. Smart beyond her years. And on this particular Tuesday morning, she was standing in Boston Logan International Airport, about to take her first solo flight. Rachel wasn't your typical 12-year-old. While other kids her age were posting dance videos and playing video games, Rachel was clutching a worn folder containing blueprints for a renewable energy prototype that had earned her a spot at the International Youth Science Competition in Geneva, Switzerland. Her backpack, decorated with patches from NASA, MIT, and various aerospace engineering programs, told the story of a girl who dreamed bigger than most adults. She stood at the departures board, her natural hair pulled into two neat puffs, wearing a simple purple hoodie and jeans. Nothing flashy. Nothing that screamed wealth or privilege. Because that's how her parents raised her. Dr. Diane Sterling, one of the most renowned neurosurgeons on the East Coast, and Julian Sterling, the tech entrepreneur whose innovations had revolutionized cloud computing infrastructure for Fortune 500 companies, they taught Rachel one fundamental lesson: stay humble. Treat everyone with respect. Your character matters more than your bank account. Rachel's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her boarding pass. This was her first time flying alone. Her mother had kissed her forehead that morning and said, "You're ready for this, baby? You're ready for all of it." Her father had hugged her tight and whispered, "Remember, if anyone ever makes you feel less than you are, use your voice. We raised you to speak up, not to stay silent." At the time, Rachel had simply nodded, not knowing just how much she'd need that advice in the hours to come. As she made her way through security, Rachel's natural kindness shone through. An elderly woman struggled with her carry-on bag, trying to lift it onto the conveyor belt. Without hesitation, Rachel set down her own backpack and helped the woman, earning a grateful smile and a pat on the shoulder. "Thank you, sweetheart. Your parents raised you right." Rachel smiled back. They really did. She had no idea how much she'd need to lean on those values today. Gate 24. Her flight to Geneva with a connection in London. Rachel arrived early, always punctual, always prepared. She sat in the waiting area, reviewing her competition notes one more time. The renewable energy prototype she designed used a combination of solar absorption and kinetic energy conversion. It was complex, innovative, and entirely her own creation. She'd spent 18 months developing it in her parents' garage, much to her father's amusement. "We have a mansion and our daughter chooses to work in the garage," he'd joke. But he was proud. They both were. The boarding announcement crackled through the speakers. "We'd like to welcome our first-class passengers and those needing extra time to board." Rachel stood, slinging her backpack over her shoulder. Her parents had upgraded her to first class. Not to spoil her, but for safety and comfort on such a long journey. Her first solo international flight, they'd reasoned, should be as stress-free as possible. Rachel had protested initially. "Mom, that's too much. I can sit in economy." But her mother had been firm. "Rachel, this isn't about being better than anyone else. It's about your safety and comfort. Accept the blessing." Rachel walked down the jetway, her heart beating faster with each step. The airplane door loomed ahead. A flight attendant stood at the entrance, greeting passengers with a practiced smile. But this woman's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Veronica Ashford was her name, though Rachel wouldn't learn that until later. Mid-40s, blonde hair pulled back in a perfect bun, makeup applied with precision, and a gaze that seemed to assess and judge every passenger in milliseconds. "Welcome aboard," Veronica said, her voice professionally pleasant as she greeted the silver-haired businessman ahead of Rachel. "First class is right through here, Mr. Price. Enjoy your flight." The man nodded and disappeared into the cabin. Then it was Rachel's turn. She stepped forward, boarding pass in hand, offering a polite smile. "Good morning." Veronica's eyes landed on Rachel, and something shifted. Her smile tightened. Her gaze traveled from Rachel's purple hoodie to her worn backpack to her young face. Then, in a motion so quick Rachel almost missed it, Veronica's eyes flicked to the boarding pass. "C2A. First class." Veronica's perfectly penciled eyebrows rose ever so slightly. Let me see that, please. She took the boarding pass from Rachel's hand, studying it far longer than necessary. She flipped it over, examining the back. She held it up to the light as if checking for forgery. Rachel felt her stomach tighten. Something was wrong. Is everything okay? Rachel asked quietly. Veronica didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to a younger flight attendant who was organizing overhead bins nearby. Trevor, come here for a moment. The junior flight attendant, a kind-faced man in his early 30s named Trevor Banks, approached. Yes, Veronica? His voice was gentle, his demeanor warm. Veronica held up Rachel's boarding pass. Does this look right to you? Trevor glanced at it, confused. It's a first-class boarding pass. C2A. Everything looks standard to me. Before you judge what happens next, before you think this is just another story, I need you to understand something. What Rachel was about to experience wasn't rare. It wasn't unusual. It happens every single day to people who don't look like what others expect them to look like. And if you've ever been judged based on your appearance, if you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong somewhere, then this story is for you. And if you haven't, then pay attention, because this story will open your eyes to what so many people endure in silence. Veronica handed the boarding pass back to Rachel with a forced smile that looked more like a grimace. Welcome aboard, she said, but her tone had changed. It was colder now, clipped. Rachel took her boarding pass and made her way into the first-class cabin. Seat 2A was by the window in the second row. She settled into the plush leather seat, carefully storing her backpack under the seat in front of her, keeping her competition folder on her lap. The seat was bigger than her bed at home. The legroom seemed endless. But Rachel couldn't enjoy any of it. Something felt off. Around her, the first-class cabin filled with passengers. In seat 1A sat Harrison Price, the silver-haired businessman who'd boarded before her. He'd already opened his Financial Times and was absorbed in an article about global markets. Behind Rachel, in seats 3C and 3D, a well-dressed couple settled in. The Chen family, though Rachel didn't know their names yet. They spoke quietly to each other in Mandarin, occasionally glancing around the cabin with the relaxed confidence of frequent flyers. Trevor, the junior flight attendant, moved through the cabin with genuine warmth, greeting passengers by name when he could, offering to help with luggage, making sure everyone was comfortable. But Veronica, the lead flight attendant, seemed to hover near Rachel's row more than anywhere else. She walked past Rachel's seat 3 times in the span of 5 minutes. Each time, her gaze lingered on Rachel just a beat too long. The third time, she paused completely, turning to Trevor, who was helping Mr. Price with his briefcase. Veronica's voice carried just enough that Rachel could hear every word, and so could several other passengers. Trevor, make sure we verify all passengers are in their correct seats. Sometimes people wander into cabins they're not supposed to be in. She said it casually, as if it were just a routine reminder. But her eyes were locked on Rachel when she said it. Trevor's face flushed with discomfort. Of course, Veronica. Though I've already checked everyone during boarding. Veronica's smile was ice. Check again. Just to be sure. Rachel's hands gripped her competition folder tighter. Her father's words echoed in her mind, use your voice. But what was she supposed to say? What had actually happened? A flight attendant had checked her boarding pass multiple times. Another had made a comment about verifying seats. On paper, nothing. But Rachel knew. Deep in her gut, she knew. She was being singled out. She was being questioned. Not because of anything she'd done, but because of how she looked. The other passengers had noticed too. Mr. Price had lowered his newspaper slightly, his eyes moving between Veronica and Rachel. The Chen couple had stopped their conversation, watching the interaction with increasingly furrowed brows. Trevor looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. And Rachel, 12-year-old Rachel Sterling, sat in her first-class seat feeling like she'd committed a crime just by existing. The cabin door closed with a heavy thunk. The captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard, announcing their route from Boston to London and then on to Geneva, estimating flight time, wishing everyone a comfortable journey. Rachel barely heard any of it. She was too busy trying to calm the anxiety building in her chest. This was supposed to be exciting. Her first solo flight. The beginning of an incredible adventure to showcase her work on an international stage. Instead, she felt like she was bracing for a battle she didn't understand how to fight. Veronica returned to the front of the cabin for the safety demonstration. She went through the motions with mechanical precision, pointing out exits, demonstrating seatbelts and oxygen masks, her face the picture of professional composure. But when her eyes swept the cabin during the demonstration, they always seemed to land on Rachel just a fraction longer than on anyone else. It was subtle. So subtle that if you weren't paying attention you might miss it. But Rachel wasn't missing anything. She was 12 years old, brilliant enough to design renewable energy prototypes, and perceptive enough to know when she was being targeted. If you're watching this and you've ever been made to feel like you don't belong, drop a comment below and tell me your story. Because what happens next, the way Rachel handles this situation, might just inspire you to stand up for yourself too. And if you're enjoying this story, if you want to see how a 12-year-old girl takes on discrimination and wins, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story is just getting started, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens when Rachel decides she's had enough. The engines roared to life. The plane began to taxi toward the runway. And Rachel Sterling, sitting in seat 2A of first class, had no idea that the next few hours would test everything her parents had ever taught her about dignity, courage, and speaking truth to power. But she was about to find out. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude, and the seatbelt sign dinged off. Within moments, Veronica appeared at the front of the first-class cabin, pushing a gleaming silver cart laden with menus, bottles of champagne, and crystal glasses that caught the light like tiny prisms. This was the moment passengers in first class waited for. The meal service. The luxury experience they'd paid premium prices to enjoy. Veronica started at row 1. She leaned toward Harrison Price with a smile that actually looked genuine. "Good afternoon, Mr. Price. May I offer you a beverage? Champagne, perhaps? Or we have an excellent selection of wines." Her voice was honey-smooth, solicitous, the epitome of first-class service. Mr. Price ordered a scotch, neat, and Veronica poured it with flourish into a heavy crystal tumbler. She handed him a leather-bound menu. "Take your time reviewing the options. Our salmon is particularly excellent today." She moved to the couple behind Rachel. The Chens received the same warm treatment. "Good afternoon, can I start you with something to drink?" Mrs. Chin requested white wine. Mr. Chin asked for sparkling water. Both were served in proper glassware, both received menus, both were treated with the respect that first-class passengers expect. Veronica's demeanor was professional, pleasant, attentive. And then she reached Rachel's row. Or rather, she passed it entirely. Veronica wheeled her cart right past seat 2A as if it were empty. As if Rachel were invisible. She continued down the aisle to serve passengers in rows 4 and 5. Rachel sat there, confused, watching the flight attendants serve everyone around her. She waited, assuming perhaps Veronica would circle back. Maybe there was some order to the service she didn't understand. But minutes passed. Passengers around her were sipping their drinks, perusing their menus, and Rachel had received nothing. Finally, Rachel did what any polite 12-year-old would do. She raised her hand. Just slightly. Tentatively. "Excuse me, miss? I haven't received a menu." Her voice was quiet but clear. Veronica, who was now pouring champagne for a passenger 3 rows back, paused. She turned slowly as if she'd been interrupted during something terribly important. Her eyes found Rachel, and for just a moment, something cold flickered across her face. Then came the smile. That practiced, professional smile that somehow conveyed the opposite of warmth. Veronica walked back toward Rachel's row, but she didn't bring the cart. She didn't bring a menu. She simply stood there, looking down at Rachel with an expression that could only be described as condescending. "The children's meals are in economy, sweetheart. You'll need to go back to your actual seat." She said it matter-of-factly, as if she were being helpful. As if she were correcting a simple mistake. Rachel blinked, confusion washing over her face. "But this is my seat. 2A, first class." She held up her boarding pass, the same one Veronica had already examined multiple times during boarding. Veronica's perfectly shaped lips pressed together in a thin line. She let out a small sigh, the kind you might make when dealing with a particularly stubborn child who won't accept reality. "Let me see that boarding pass again. These things get mixed up all the time." She took the boarding pass from Rachel's hand for what was now the 4th time. She studied it like a detective examining evidence at a crime scene. She held it at different angles. She ran her finger over the seat number. She checked the flight number, the date, the passenger name. Her examination was so excessive, so theatrical, that several passengers were now openly watching. Rachel felt heat rising to her cheeks. She felt like a criminal. Like someone who'd been caught trying to sneak into somewhere she didn't belong. Trevor, the junior flight attendant, had been organizing overhead bins in the rear of first class. He'd witnessed the entire exchange, and the discomfort on his face was impossible to miss. He approached quickly, his voice gentle but firm. "Veronica, is everything all right?" Veronica didn't look at him. She was still examining Rachel's boarding pass as if it might suddenly reveal itself to be fraudulent. Just verifying the seating, Trevor. We need to be thorough. Trevor glanced at the boarding pass, then at Rachel, then back at Veronica. That's seat 2A. First class. Everything is in order. His tone suggested this should be the end of the discussion. Veronica's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. She handed the boarding pass back to Rachel with a smile that looked like it physically pained her to produce. Well, I suppose someone made special arrangements. The way she said special arrangements dripped with implication. The emphasis on special suggested something unearned, something given rather than deserved, something that bent the rules for reasons that shouldn't apply. Harrison Price had lowered his Financial Times completely now. He was watching the interaction with furrowed brows, his scotch forgotten in his hand. The Chens had gone silent, their eyes moving between Veronica and Rachel with increasing concern. And Rachel, sitting in her seat with her boarding pass clutched in her hand, felt something shift inside her. Her first instinct was to pull out her phone, to call her mother, to call her father, to have them fix the situation the way parents fix things. But then she remembered her father's words from that morning, stand up for yourself first. We raised you to use your voice. So Rachel sat up straighter. She looked directly at Veronica and said nothing, because sometimes silence is its own form of speaking up. Sometimes refusing to shrink, refusing to apologize for existing, is the strongest statement you can make. Veronica turned away, finally wheeling her cart back toward Rachel's row to complete the service she should have started with. What would you like to drink? The question was delivered with all the warmth of a January morning in Boston. Apple juice, please, Rachel said quietly. Veronica disappeared toward the galley and returned moments later with a plastic cup filled with water. Not apple juice. Water. And not in the crystal glassware that every other first-class passenger had been given. A plastic cup. The kind you might give to a toddler who might spill. She set it on Rachel's tray table without a word and turned to leave. Excuse me, Rachel said, her voice stronger now. I asked for apple juice. Veronica turned back, her smile so tight it looked like it might crack her face. We're out of apple juice in first class. Water will have to do. It was a lie. Rachel could see bottles of apple juice on the cart. She could see Veronica had just served apple juice to Mr. Chin 2 rows back. But what was Rachel supposed to do? Call the flight attendant a liar? Demand to inspect the cart? So she said nothing. She accepted the water in the plastic cup and tried to ignore the way Harrison Price was now staring at Veronica with barely concealed disgust. And what would you like for your meal? Veronica asked, still not offering Rachel a menu. Rachel, who had glimpsed the menu in Mr. Price's hands, tried to remember what she'd seen. What are the options? It was a reasonable question. Every other passenger had been given time to review the menu and ask questions. But Veronica responded with a dramatic sigh, the kind you might make if someone was asking you to explain quantum physics when you were already exhausted. We have foie gras with cherry reduction, beef tenderloin with truffle butter, and salmon with lemon caper sauce. Do you even understand what foie gras is? Perhaps you'd prefer something simpler? The condescension in her voice was no longer subtle. It was blatant, dripping from every word. The implication was clear. This food is too sophisticated for you. This experience is beyond your understanding. You don't belong here. Rachel felt anger spark in her chest, but she kept her voice level. I'm actually familiar with most cuisines. My parents travel extensively for work. She paused, letting that sink in. I'll have the salmon, please. Veronica's expression flickered. For just a second, something like surprise crossed her face, followed quickly by what could only be described as a sneer. Of course you will. She walked away without another word, and Rachel sat there feeling like she just fought a battle with nothing but words and dignity as her weapons. 20 minutes passed. Around Rachel, passengers finished their drinks and began receiving their meals. The Chens got their food. Harrison Price got his. Passengers in rows 4, 5, and 6 were served. The cabin filled with the sounds of cutlery on china, quiet conversations, and the occasional appreciative murmur about the quality of the food. Rachel sat in seat 2A, her plastic cup of water still untouched on her tray table, waiting. By the time Veronica finally appeared with Rachel's meal, Harrison Price was pushing away his empty plate, satisfied and full. The meal that was set before Rachel looked nothing like what the other passengers had received. Where their plates had been artfully arranged, generous portions elegantly presented with garnishes and sauces, Rachel's salmon was a small, lonely piece of fish with a few sad vegetables scattered around it. No garnish. No artistic presentation. It looked like the scraps left over after everyone else had been served. Because that's exactly what it was. Mrs. Chen glanced over at Rachel's plate, then at her own, then leaned toward her husband and whispered in Mandarin. This is disgraceful. That child is being targeted. Mr. Chen nodded, his face troubled. Should we say something? His wife's expression was conflicted. I don't know. What can we say? That we notice she's being treated differently? Will that help or make it worse for her? They fell silent, guilt and helplessness written across both their faces. Trevor, who had been serving beverages in the back, saw Rachel's meal and his face went pale. He caught Veronica's eye and opened his mouth as if to say something, but Veronica's sharp glance silenced him before any words could form. Trevor looked at Rachel with apology written all over his face, but he said nothing. He did nothing. And Rachel ate her small portion of salmon in silence, acutely aware that every passenger around her had witnessed her treatment. Some looked away uncomfortably. Some pretended not to notice. But they all knew. They all saw. And their silence was its own form of complicity. Have you ever been in a situation where you witnessed someone being mistreated but didn't know if you should speak up? Drop a comment and tell me what you did or what you wish you'd done. Because what's about to happen next will show you why silence in the face of injustice helps no one. The meal service ended. Trays were collected. The cabin settled into the quiet lull that follows food and drink. Some passengers reclined their seats and closed their eyes. Others opened laptops or books. The lights dimmed slightly, creating that artificial twilight that airlines use to encourage rest. Rachel tried to focus on her competition folder, reviewing her notes for the 100th time, but her concentration was shattered. She felt humiliated, angry, confused, and underneath it all, a growing determination that this wasn't okay. That what was happening to her wasn't acceptable. Then the plane hit turbulence. Not the gentle bump and sway that experienced flyers barely notice. Serious turbulence. The kind that makes the airplane feel like a toy being shaken by a giant hand. The seatbelt sign dinged on. The captain's voice came over the intercom, steady but serious. Flight attendants, please take your seats immediately. The plane dropped suddenly, that stomach-lurching sensation that makes you grab for anything solid. Then it bounced back up, rattled left, then right. Rachel's hands shot to her armrests, gripping so hard her knuckles went white. Her breath came faster. This was her first solo flight, remember? She'd never experienced turbulence without her parents beside her, reassuring her it was normal, holding her hand, telling her everything would be okay. Now she was alone, and the plane was bucking like a wild animal, and her 12-year-old mind was racing through every worst-case scenario she'd ever heard about. Veronica was making her way back to the flight attendant jump seat when she passed Rachel's row. She saw Rachel's white knuckles, her wide eyes, the fear written plainly across her young face. And instead of offering comfort, instead of providing the reassurance that any decent flight attendant would give a frightened child, Veronica paused and smiled. That same cold smile she'd been wearing all flight. First time in first class and first time flying? What a day of firsts for you. Her tone was mocking. Amused. She was enjoying Rachel's fear. Rachel felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked hard, refusing to let them fall. She would not give this woman the satisfaction of seeing her cry. She would not. The plane shook again and Rachel's breathing got faster, shorter. She recognized the signs. A panic attack building. She'd had them before during stressful situations. Her therapist had given her tools. Grounding techniques. Her stress ball. Where was her stress ball? With shaking hands, Rachel reached under the seat in front of her for her backpack. She unzipped it, fumbling inside for the small rubber ball she always carried. But in her haste, with the plane still shaking, her competition folder slipped from her lap. Papers exploded across the aisle. Blueprints of her renewable energy prototype. Research notes. Calculations. And photos. Several photos she'd tucked in the folder. Her at her school science fair. Her in her parents' garage working on the prototype. And one photo that mattered more than all the others. A family photo from 3 months ago. The photo showed Rachel standing between her parents at a formal event. All three of them were dressed elegantly. Her mother in a stunning evening gown, her father in a tailored tuxedo. Behind them, a banner read Sterling Foundation Annual Gala. Her father was holding an award, the Humanitarian of the Year plaque gleaming in the camera flash. It was a beautiful photo. A proud moment for their family. The Sterling Foundation, which her father had founded, provided STEM education resources to underprivileged schools across the country. It had changed thousands of lives. Veronica, who had been about to walk away, saw the papers scatter. With a put-upon sigh, she bent down and began gathering them. She picked up the family photo and for just a moment her expression changed. Her eyes widened slightly. She looked at the photo more closely, her gaze moving from the image of Rachel to the real Rachel sitting in the seat, then back to the photo. The Sterling Foundation. The name was clearly visible. Julian Sterling accepting an award. Dr. Diane Sterling beside him. And Rachel, their daughter, beaming with pride. Something flickered across Veronica's face. Was it recognition? Uncertainty? The dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, she'd made a terrible miscalculation? But then just as quickly her expression hardened again. She handed the photo back to Rachel with a dismissive little laugh. Cute photo shoot. That's what she said. Cute photo shoot. As if the Sterling Foundation Gala was something Rachel had simply posed for. As if it were make-believe. As if a 12-year-old black girl couldn't possibly be the daughter of prominent philanthropists and business leaders. Rachel took the photo back and something inside her snapped. Not in an explosive way. In a quiet, determined way. She looked directly at Veronica and when she spoke, her voice was calm but firm. That's my family. At the Sterling Foundation Gala. Perhaps you've heard of it? It wasn't a question. It was a statement. A line drawn in the sand. An assertion of identity and worth that refused to be dismissed. Veronica laughed. Actually laughed. Oh, we have a little storyteller. How creative. She said it loud enough that several passengers heard. Loud enough that it was meant to humiliate. To put Rachel back in what Veronica perceived as her place. But this time something different happened. Harrison Price, who had been silent throughout the entire flight despite witnessing everything, set down his Financial Times. He turned fully in his seat and looked at Rachel. Really looked at her. Then he looked at the photo still clutched in her hand. Sterling, he said slowly, his voice carrying authority. Julian Sterling. Sterling Tech Solutions. It wasn't a question. Rachel nodded, relief flooding through her that someone finally believed her. Harrison Price's expression transformed from curiosity to recognition to something like anger. He looked up at Veronica, who had frozen in place. Do you have any idea who you've been treating like garbage for the past 2 hours? His voice was low but furious. Julian Sterling revolutionized cloud computing infrastructure. Dr. Diane Sterling is one of the most respected neurosurgeons in the country. I know because she operated on my colleague's daughter and saved her life. And this is their daughter. The cabin went silent. The turbulence had subsided, but a different kind of storm was brewing. The Chens were watching with intense interest now, no longer whispering but openly focused on the confrontation unfolding in row 2. Other passengers had turned to look, sensing that something significant was happening. And Veronica, standing there with her perfect hair and perfect makeup and her completely shattered composure, tried to recover. I was simply doing my job, ensuring proper seating and... You were discriminating against a child, Mr. Chin said from behind Rachel, his accented English clear and firm. We have watched the entire flight. We saw everything. His wife nodded vigorously. The different treatment. The plastic cup while others received glass. The smaller meal served last. This is unacceptable. Trevor, still strapped into the jump seat, looked like he wanted to disappear. Veronica's face had gone from pale to red. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. I assure you there's been a misunderstanding. The only misunderstanding, Harrison Price interrupted, is yours. You assumed this child didn't belong in first class because of how she looks. You treated her with contempt. You humiliated her. And now you're trying to backtrack because you've realized who her family is. Which, frankly, makes it even worse. She deserved respect whether her parents are billionaires or bus drivers. Rachel sat there watching adults defend her, feeling a complex mix of emotions. Gratitude that someone had finally spoken up. Anger that it took a man in a business suit validating her identity before anyone believed her. Sadness that this was her reality. If this story is making you think about how we treat people differently based on assumptions, hit that subscribe button. Because Rachel's about to do something that most adults would be afraid to do, and you won't want to miss it. Veronica, clearly panicking now, tried one more time to salvage the situation. Miss Sterling, I apologize if my service wasn't to your standards. First-class service can be, Rachel cut her off. Her voice wasn't loud but it was steady. Strong. You didn't fail to meet service standards. You targeted me from the moment I boarded. You checked my boarding pass 4 times. You made comments about people wandering into the wrong cabin. You skipped me during beverage service. You gave me water in a plastic cup while everyone else got glassware. You questioned whether I understood what foie gras is. You served me last with the smallest portion. And when I was scared during turbulence, you mocked me. The cabin was so quiet you could hear the engine hum. Rachel wasn't finished. And the worst part? You knew what you were doing. Every step of the way you knew. Because when other passengers questioned you when my identity was confirmed, you didn't apologize for your behavior. You apologized for my experience. As if the problem was my perception and not your actions. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the weight of every person who'd ever been judged by their appearance, every child who'd been underestimated, every individual who'd been made to feel less than. I'm 12 years old. I'm traveling alone for the first time to represent my country at an international science competition. I was nervous enough without being treated like I'd committed a crime by sitting in the seat my parents paid for. You should be ashamed. The words hung in the air like smoke. Veronica stood there, her practiced composure completely shattered, with no response, no defense, no way to undo what she'd done. And Rachel Sterling, 12 years old, brilliant and done being silent, reached into her backpack and pulled out her phone. She was about to do something that would change everything. But we'll get to that in a moment. Because what happened next set off a chain of events that ended with Rachel standing in that corporate boardroom, making grown executives squirm in their seats. The question you should be asking yourself right now is this. In Rachel's position, would you have stayed quiet to avoid making waves, or would you have done exactly what she was about to do? Rachel unbuckled her seatbelt and stood up, her legs slightly unsteady. Whether from the turbulence or the adrenaline coursing through her veins, she couldn't tell. "Excuse me," she said quietly to no one in particular, and made her way toward the first-class lavatory. She needed a moment. Just a moment away from Veronica's cold stares, away from the pitying glances of the other passengers, away from everything. The bathroom was small but pristine, all polished chrome and soft lighting. Rachel locked the door behind her and stood there for a moment, just breathing. Then she looked up at her reflection in the mirror. Her wire-rimmed glasses were slightly askew. Her purple hoodie had a small wrinkle near the collar. Her two puffs were still neat, still exactly as her mother had styled them that morning. She looked like herself. Just Rachel. A 12-year-old girl who loved science and her parents and had dreams bigger than most people could imagine. But right now, looking at her reflection, she didn't feel brilliant or capable or any of the things her parents always told her she was. She felt small. Diminished. Like maybe Veronica was right to question whether she belonged in that seat. And that feeling, that doubt creeping in, made her angry. Not at Veronica. At herself. For allowing someone else's prejudice to make her question her own worth. Her father's words came flooding back, as clear as if he were standing beside her. She could hear his voice, warm and steady and absolutely certain. Your worth isn't determined by how others see you, Rachel. It's determined by how you see yourself. And Rachel, you are brilliant, kind, and strong. He told her that last year when she'd been the only black student at a robotics competition and some of the other kids had questioned whether she'd really built her own robot or if her parents had done it for her. He told her that when she'd overheard people at the country club whispering about whether the Sterlings had really earned their wealth or gotten it through affirmative action. He told her that every single time the world tried to make her feel less than she was. Rachel squared her shoulders. She adjusted her glasses. She looked at herself in that mirror and made a decision. She wasn't going to call her parents. She wasn't going to have her father make a phone call, pull strings, use his influence to fix the situation. Because that's what everyone would expect, right? That's what Veronica probably assumed would happen the moment she realized who Rachel really was. Rich girl runs to her powerful parents, and they solve all her problems. No. Rachel was going to handle this herself. The way her parents had raised her to handle injustice. With documentation. With evidence. With the truth. She pulled out her phone. The airline had Wi-Fi, something her mother had made sure to enable before she'd left that morning in case of emergencies. Rachel opened her browser and navigated to the airline's website. She found the app download link, installed it, and watched as it loaded on her screen. Her fingers moved with purpose now, with determination replacing the shame she'd felt moments before. She logged into her frequent flyer account. Rachel Sterling, passenger number 8847392. She'd been flying since she was a baby, accumulating miles on family vacations, business trips with her parents, visits to relatives. The account showed gold status. Years of loyalty to this airline. All of that history, all of those flights, and she'd never once filed a complaint. Until today. Rachel navigated to the customer service section, then found what she was looking for: file a complaint. The form that appeared on her screen was clearly designed for adults. Multiple fields. Drop-down menus. Space for detailed descriptions. Most 12-year-olds would take one look at it and give up. But Rachel wasn't most 12-year-olds. She'd been writing research papers since she was 9. She presented her renewable energy findings to panels of adult scientists who'd initially dismissed her age until they heard her speak. She knew how to document, how to articulate, how to build a case. She started typing. Her thumbs moved across the phone screen with surprising speed. Today, December 23, 2025, I boarded Flight 447 from Boston to London, connecting to Geneva. I am a 12-year-old passenger traveling alone in first class, seat 2A. From the moment I boarded at approximately 9:15 a.m., I was subjected to discriminatory treatment by lead flight attendant Veronica Ashford. Rachel continued, her account precise and detailed. She included everything. The multiple boarding pass checks. The comment about passengers wandering into wrong cabins, made loudly enough for multiple passengers to hear, at approximately 9:20 a.m. The meal service that began at 10:45 a.m., during which she was completely skipped while every other first-class passenger was served. She noted the timestamps. When she'd requested apple juice at 11:05 a.m. and received water in a plastic cup while other passengers had crystal glassware. She documented Veronica's question about whether she understood what foie gras was at 11:12 a.m. The emphasis on special arrangements, that implied Rachel hadn't legitimately earned her seat. The salmon meal that arrived at 11:35 a.m. with noticeably smaller portions than other passengers received. The comment during turbulence at approximately 12:40 p.m. mocking her fear and inexperience. Every incident. Every timestamp. Every detail that would be impossible to dispute. But Rachel didn't stop there. She included witness information. Passengers who observed this treatment include Harrison Price in seat 1A, Mr. and Mrs. Chen in seats 3C and 3D, and junior flight attendant Trevor Banks, who appeared visibly uncomfortable with Ms. Ashford's behavior throughout the flight. She was building a case that couldn't be dismissed or ignored. A complaint so thorough, so professional, so documented, that the airline would have to take it seriously. Rachel's fingers paused over the screen. She read through what she'd written, making sure every word was accurate. She wasn't exaggerating. She wasn't being emotional or hyperbolic. She was simply stating facts. Times, locations, witnesses, exact quotes when she could remember them. It was the kind of complaint that most adults would struggle to compose, let alone a 12-year-old girl typing on her phone in an airplane bathroom. At the bottom of the form there was a signature line. Rachel typed, Rachel Sterling, passenger 2A, frequent flyer number 8847392. Her thumb hovered over the submit button. This was it. The moment of commitment. Once she pressed that button there was no taking it back. The complaint would go into the airline system. It would be read. It would be investigated. Or at least it should be. But what if nothing happened? What if they dismissed her because she was just a kid? What if Veronica faced no consequences and Rachel had stirred up all this trouble for nothing? What if? Then Rachel remembered Veronica's sneer. The plastic cup. The small portions. The mocking comment during her fear. She remembered feeling like she didn't belong. Like she was being punished for existing while black in a first-class seat. She remembered every humiliating moment of the past 3 hours. And she pressed submit. The phone screen showed a loading icon, then a confirmation message. Your complaint has been received. Reference number, CC447-231225-0847. A customer service representative will review your complaint within 24 to 48 hours. Rachel took a deep breath. She'd done it. She'd stood up for herself, not by yelling or causing a scene, but by using the system the way it was designed to be used. By documenting injustice and demanding accountability. She washed her hands, dried them carefully, and took one more look at herself in the mirror. This time she recognized the girl looking back at her. Brilliant, kind, strong. Just like her father said. Rachel unlocked the bathroom door and walked back to her seat with her head held high. The cabin had settled into quiet again after the turbulence and confrontation. Some passengers were reading. Others had reclined their seats for naps. Rachel slid back into seat 2A, carefully storing her phone in her backpack. She pulled out her competition folder and tried to focus on her notes, but her mind was elsewhere. What would happen now? When would the airline respond? Would they even care about a complaint from a 12-year-old? She was so lost in these thoughts that she almost didn't hear the captain's voice crackling over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Rodriguez speaking. Her voice was professional, calm, the kind of voice that had announced thousands of flights, handled countless situations and always projected competence. We're currently cruising at 37,000 feet with clear skies ahead. We expect to arrive in London on schedule at 6:45 p.m. local time. Please enjoy the remainder of your flight. A routine announcement. Nothing unusual. But then she added something that made several passengers glance up from their books and phones. Senior crew, please report to the flight deck. It wasn't said with urgency or alarm, but it was unusual enough that people noticed. Veronica, who had been standing near the galley organizing paperwork, looked up sharply. Her expression flickered through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, annoyance, and then something that might have been concern. She set down her paperwork and walked briskly toward the front of the aircraft, disappearing through the cockpit door. The cabin relaxed slightly with Veronica gone. It was like a weight had been lifted, a tension that people hadn't fully realized they'd been carrying. Trevor emerged from the rear galley where he'd been preparing the dessert service. Without Veronica's watchful presence, his entire demeanor changed. His shoulders relaxed. His smile became genuine instead of nervous. He moved through the cabin with a beverage cart, checking on passengers, and then he did something remarkable. He approached Rachel's seat. Not reluctantly. Not with the careful distance Veronica had maintained. He crouched down slightly so he was at her eye level, and when he spoke, his voice was soft but filled with emotion. Rachel, I'm so sorry for how you've been treated today. That wasn't right. None of it was right, and I should have said something earlier. I'm truly sorry I didn't. His apology was so unexpected, so genuine, that Rachel felt tears prick at her eyes for the second time that day. But this time they weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of relief, of validation. Thank you, Rachel managed to say, her voice thick. Trevor's kind face showed nothing but sincerity. Can I get you anything? Anything at all? I mean it. Whatever you want, if we have it on this plane, it's yours. Rachel thought for a moment. She'd barely eaten the small salmon portion and she was actually hungry now. She remembered glimpsing the dessert menu earlier before everything had gone wrong. The chocolate cake I saw on the dessert menu? Her voice was tentative, as if she still expected to be told no, to be given something less than what she'd asked for. Trevor's face broke into a wide smile. You'll have the biggest slice we have. And I'm adding extra ice cream. Chocolate and vanilla, because why choose? He disappeared toward the galley, and Rachel felt something unfamiliar after hours of tension. She felt cared for. Like she mattered. Like her comfort was important. It was such a stark contrast to Veronica's treatment that it almost made the earlier humiliation hurt more. Because it proved that kindness was possible. That respect was a choice. And Veronica had chosen cruelty. Harrison Price, who had been working on his laptop, closed it and turned to Rachel. His silver hair caught the cabin light, and his expression was thoughtful. I couldn't help but overhear your name earlier. Sterling, as in Sterling Tech Solutions. Rachel nodded, suddenly shy. Meeting strangers was always a bit awkward, even strangers who were being kind. Harrison extended his hand across the aisle, a gesture of respect you'd offer to an adult, not a child. It's an honor to meet you, Miss Sterling. I'm Harrison Price. Your father revolutionized my company's infrastructure 3 years ago. Sterling Tech Solutions implemented a cloud system that saved us millions and tripled our efficiency. Your father is a legend in the industry. Rachel shook his hand, surprised by the firmness of his grip, by the genuine admiration in his voice. But Harrison wasn't finished. And your mother, Dr. Diane Sterling. She performed emergency brain surgery on my colleague's daughter 2 years ago. The girl had been in a car accident, and 3 other neurosurgeons said it was too risky, that she wouldn't survive the operation. Your mother said she'd survive and thrive. She was right. That girl just started college last fall. Your mother saved her life. Rachel felt pride swell in her chest. Her parents. Her brilliant, compassionate, world-changing parents. She'd always known they were special, but hearing it from a stranger somehow made it more real. From the row behind, Mrs. Chen leaned forward, her elegant face warm with concern. We saw everything today. Every single thing that woman did to you. It was cruel and unacceptable. Her husband nodded in agreement. You handled yourself with remarkable grace. My wife and I were discussing whether to intervene, whether to say something. We should have spoken up sooner. We're sorry we didn't. Their apology was unnecessary but appreciated. Rachel realized something profound in that moment. These adults, these strangers, they'd seen her humanity when Veronica had refused to. They'd witnessed injustice, and even if belatedly, they'd acknowledged it. They'd validated her experience. Thank you, Rachel said to all of them. Thank you for seeing me. The words carried more weight than she'd intended. For seeing me. Not seeing my parents' accomplishments or their wealth or their influence. For seeing me. A 12-year-old girl who deserved respect simply because she was a human being. Trevor returned with a plate that made Rachel's eyes widen. The slice of chocolate cake was enormous, easily 3 times the size of a normal serving. It was layered with dark chocolate ganache, topped with chocolate shavings, and accompanied by generous scoops of both chocolate and vanilla ice cream. It was glorious. "Here you go," Trevor said, setting it on her tray table with a flourish. "And please, if you need anything else, anything at all, you just let me know." "Okay." Rachel nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the kindness. She picked up her fork and took a bite of the cake. It was rich and moist and absolutely delicious. The kind of dessert that makes you close your eyes in appreciation. For the first time since boarding this flight, Rachel felt something close to contentment. The cabin continued its quiet rhythm. Pages turning. Keyboard keys clicking. The soft hum of conversation. And then the cockpit door opened. Veronica emerged and everything about her had changed. Her face, which had been flushed with anger and embarrassment after the confrontation, was now pale. Not just pale but bloodless. The kind of pale that comes with genuine shock or fear. Her jaw was rigid, her movements stiff. She walked through the first-class cabin without making eye contact with anyone. Not the passengers. Not Trevor. Certainly not Rachel. She went straight to the rear galley and stayed there, hidden from view. Something had happened in that cockpit. Something significant. Trevor noticed too. He glanced toward the rear galley, then toward the cockpit, confusion written across his face. He went about his duties, but Rachel could see him stealing glances at where Veronica had disappeared, clearly wondering what had transpired. About 20 minutes later, as Rachel was finishing her cake and the flight was beginning its initial descent toward London, Trevor approached her seat one more time. He crouched down again, but this time his expression was more serious. "Rachel," he said quietly, ensuring only she could hear. "The captain wants to see you before landing. After we've touched down and passengers are deplaning." Rachel's stomach dropped. The captain wanted to see her? What? Was she in trouble? Had her complaint caused some kind of problem? Trevor must have seen the fear flash across her face because he quickly added, "Don't worry. You're not in trouble. I promise. Captain Rodriguez just wants to speak with you personally." He gave her a reassuring smile and moved away to prepare the cabin for landing. If you're watching this wondering what the captain could possibly want with Rachel, hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happens when Rachel walks into that cockpit is going to restore your faith that sometimes, the system actually works. Rachel sat in her seat, her half-eaten cake forgotten, her mind racing. The captain wanted to see her. Captain Rodriguez. The woman whose voice she'd heard over the intercom throughout the flight, always calm, always professional, always in control. What could she possibly want? Rachel's hands were shaking slightly as she fastened her seatbelt for landing. Around her, passengers were doing the same. Collecting their belongings. Putting away laptops and books. Preparing for arrival. Harrison Price caught her eye and gave her an encouraging nod. Mrs. Chin reached forward and gently squeezed Rachel's shoulder. These small gestures of support from strangers meant more than they could possibly know. The plane descended through clouds. Rachel could see the lights of London appearing below, a sprawling sea of illumination in the early evening darkness. The landing was smooth, professional, exactly what you'd expect from a captain with Captain Rodriguez's experience. The plane taxied to the gate, and the seatbelt sign dinged off. Passengers began standing, opening overhead bins, gathering their possessions in that chaotic dance that happens at the end of every flight. Rachel remained seated, as Trevor had indicated she should. She watched as first class emptied out. Harrison Price paused at her row. "Miss Sterling, it was truly an honor meeting you. Give my regards to your parents." He handed her a business card. "If you or they ever need anything, please don't hesitate to reach out." Rachel took the card, touched by the gesture. The Chen stopped as well. "You are a remarkable young woman," Mrs. Chen said. "Don't ever let anyone make you doubt that." Her husband added, "What happened today was wrong. But how you handled it, with dignity and strength, that was absolutely right." They moved on, and soon first class was empty except for Rachel, Trevor, and somewhere in the back Veronica, still hiding. Trevor approached Rachel's seat. "Ready?" he asked gently. Rachel nodded, even though she wasn't sure she was ready at all. She gathered her backpack, clutched her competition folder, and followed Trevor toward the front of the aircraft. The cockpit door was open now. Trevor knocked gently on the frame. "Captain Rodriguez? I have Miss Sterling here." A voice from inside, strong and clear, responded. "Send her in, please." Trevor stepped aside and Rachel, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, stepped through the cockpit door. What she saw inside would change everything. The captain turned in her seat, and Rachel found herself looking into the sharp, intelligent eyes of a woman who had just made a decision. A decision that would lead to justice. A decision that would validate everything Rachel had endured. But we'll get to exactly what Captain Rodriguez said in just a moment. The question you need to ask yourself is this. Have you ever filed a formal complaint about discrimination or mistreatment? Or have you stayed silent, hoping the problem would just go away? Drop a comment and let me know. Because Rachel's about to learn that sometimes, using the proper channels, documenting everything and refusing to stay silent, that's how real change happens. The cockpit was smaller than Rachel had imagined. She'd seen pictures, of course, watched documentaries about aviation, but being inside the actual space where pilots controlled thousands of tons of metal and hundreds of lives was something else entirely. Screens glowed with data. Switches and buttons covered every surface. And sitting in the captain's seat, turned to face Rachel, was Captain Isabel Rodriguez. She was a Latina woman, probably in her 50s, with dark hair pulled back in a practical bun and sharp brown eyes that seemed to see everything at once. There was no warmth in her expression, but there was no coldness either. Just a no-nonsense demeanor that suggested this was a woman who dealt with problems directly and efficiently. The kind of person who didn't waste time on pleasantries when there was business to handle. She gestured to the jump seat behind the first officer's chair. "Please sit down, Miss Sterling." Rachel sat, her backpack clutched on her lap like a shield. Captain Rodriguez studied her for a long moment, and Rachel fought the urge to look away. She'd learned from her father that making eye contact, even when you were nervous, showed confidence and honesty. Finally, Captain Rodriguez spoke. "Miss Sterling, I received your complaint mid-flight. It was forwarded to me immediately." She paused and Rachel's stomach clenched. Here it comes, she thought. The explanation of why nothing would be done. Why her complaint didn't matter. But Captain Rodriguez continued, and her words weren't what Rachel expected. "Your complaint was flagged in our system due to your family's significant relationship with this airline. The Sterling family holds substantial shares in our parent company, and any complaint from a Sterling is automatically escalated to senior management and the flight crew." Rachel felt her face flush. Of course. Of course, that's why the captain had received her complaint so quickly. Not because what happened to her was wrong, but because of who her parents were. Because of money and influence and shares in a company. Rachel interrupted, something she rarely did with adults, but the words burst out before she could stop them. "I don't want special treatment because of my family. I filed that complaint because what happened was wrong. It would be wrong if it happened to anyone. It wouldn't matter if I was a Sterling or a Smith or any other name. What that flight attendant did was discrimination, and it's not acceptable regardless of who the passenger is." Her voice was trembling slightly, but it was strong. Clear. Unequivocal. Captain Rodriguez's stern expression shifted. The corners of her mouth turned up in what might have been the beginning of a smile. "That's exactly the right answer." She leaned forward slightly, her eyes locked on Rachel's. "And you're right. What happened was unacceptable. But I need you to understand something, Rachel." "May I call you Rachel?" Rachel nodded. "I need you to understand that yes, your complaint was flagged because of your family's relationship with this airline. But that's not why I'm taking it seriously." Captain Rodriguez reached for a tablet mounted near her seat and pulled up something on the screen. "I've been flying for 32 years. I've been a captain for 15. I've read thousands of passenger complaints in that time. Most of them are vague. The flight attendant was rude. The service was bad. I didn't like the attitude. They're emotional responses without specifics, and while the feelings are valid, they're nearly impossible to investigate or act upon." She turned the tablet toward Rachel, and Rachel saw her own complaint displayed on the screen. "But your complaint?" Captain Rodriguez's voice carried something that might have been admiration. "You documented everything. Timestamps for every incident. Exact quotes when you could recall them. Specific seat numbers for witnesses. You noted the junior flight attendant's visible discomfort, which suggests a pattern of behavior from the lead attendant. You described not just what happened but the context around it, the escalation, the cumulative effect. Rachel, you built a case like a lawyer would build a case. How old are you?" 12, Rachel said quietly. Captain Rodriguez's eyebrows shot up. For a moment, her professional composure cracked, and genuine surprise crossed her face. 12. She repeated the word like she was testing its accuracy. "You're 12 years old and you filed the most thorough, professional, actionable complaint I've seen in my entire career." She set the tablet down and looked at Rachel with something approaching respect. That's remarkable. Truly remarkable. Rachel didn't know what to say. She'd spent the past several hours feeling small and powerless, and now this captain, this woman who commanded aircraft across oceans, was calling her remarkable. Captain Rodriguez wasn't finished. I pulled Veronica Ashford's employment file while we were in the air. Do you know what I found? Rachel shook her head. 7 prior complaints. 7. All filed by passengers who felt they'd been discriminated against or treated poorly. And do you know what happened with those 7 complaints? Nothing? Rachel guessed. Captain Rodriguez nodded grimly. Nothing. They were all dismissed due to insufficient evidence. Because none of those passengers documented what happened the way you did. They filed emotional complaints without specifics, and Veronica would deny everything, and without witnesses or concrete evidence, the airline sided with the employee. Every single time. She paused, letting that sink in. But your complaint is different. You have witnesses. You have timestamps. You have specific quotes and observable behaviors. This complaint can't be dismissed. It won't be dismissed. Rachel felt something crack inside her chest. Validation. That's what this was. After hours of being made to feel like she was overreacting, like she was making something out of nothing, here was an authority figure telling her that she was right. That what happened mattered. That her voice had power. What happens now? Rachel asked. Captain Rodriguez's expression became serious again. Professional. Now, an investigation begins. Veronica Ashford will be interviewed. The witnesses you identified will be contacted. Trevor Banks, the junior flight attendant, will be questioned about what he observed. Will Trevor get in trouble for not speaking up? Rachel asked quickly. She didn't want her complaint to hurt the one person who'd shown her kindness. Captain Rodriguez shook her head. Trevor is a junior employee who was likely afraid of retaliation from his superior. That's unfortunately common in many industries. He won't face consequences for his silence, though we will be implementing better protocols for reporting concerns about senior staff. But Veronica? Captain Rodriguez's voice went cold. Veronica Ashford has a pattern of behavior that this airline should have addressed years ago. Your complaint, Rachel, is the catalyst that will finally force us to take action. Rachel nodded slowly. She felt strange, powerful and small at the same time. Like she'd done something important but wasn't quite sure what the full consequences would be. Captain Rodriguez seemed to sense her uncertainty. Rachel, I want you to understand something. What you did today, filing that complaint, standing up for yourself with documentation and evidence, that took courage. But it also took intelligence and maturity. Most adults wouldn't have handled this situation as well as you did. She stood up and Rachel stood too. You have a connecting flight to Geneva, yes? Captain Rodriguez asked. Rachel nodded. For the youth science competition. I'm presenting my renewable energy prototype. Captain Rodriguez's expression softened for the first time. Of course you are. I shouldn't be surprised that a 12-year-old who files complaints like a seasoned lawyer is also brilliant enough to compete internationally in science. She extended her hand and Rachel shook it. It's been an honor meeting you, Miss Sterling. I'm sorry your first solo flight had to include this experience. But I'm not sorry you found your voice. Rachel left the cockpit feeling like she was floating. Trevor was waiting just outside, his kind face anxious. Everything okay? He asked. Rachel nodded. Everything's going to be okay. She meant it. For the first time since boarding this flight, she genuinely believed that things would be okay. Not just for her but for everyone. Trevor walked with her to the exit, carrying her backpack like the gentleman he was. As Rachel stepped off the plane into the jetway, she turned back. Trevor? Thank you for being kind when it mattered. Trevor's eyes got a little misty. Thank you for being brave when it was hard. Rachel made her way through London Heathrow Airport, following the signs for connecting flights. The terminal was massive, bustling with travelers from every corner of the world. She found her gate for the Geneva flight and settled into a seat, pulling out her competition folder to review her notes one more time. She had about 90 minutes before boarding. Time to decompress. Time to process everything that had happened. But 20 minutes later, Rachel looked up from her notes and froze. Walking through the terminal, flanked by 2 people in airline uniforms and what appeared to be a security officer, was Veronica Ashford. She was no longer wearing her flight attendant jacket. She looked smaller somehow, diminished without the authority of her uniform and position. Her perfect hair was coming loose from its bun. Her makeup, which had been immaculate during the flight, was smudged like she'd been crying. And her face, when she spotted Rachel sitting at the gate, absolutely crumbled. One of the people escorting Veronica, a woman in a sharp business suit with an airline corporate badge, noticed Rachel too. She said something to her companions, and the group changed direction, walking directly toward Rachel. Rachel's heart started pounding. What was happening? Why were they bringing Veronica to her? The corporate representative reached Rachel first. She was a black woman, probably in her 40s, with an expression that was professionally sympathetic but also clearly uncomfortable. "Miss Sterling?" she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Rachel nodded. "I'm Claudia Morrison, Regional Customer Service Director for the airline. Miss Sterling, we owe you an enormous apology. What you experienced on Flight 447 was completely unacceptable and in direct violation of our company's values and policies." Her words were clearly rehearsed, the kind of corporate apology that legal departments craft carefully. But there was genuine regret in her eyes. Rachel stood up, clutching her competition folder. She was acutely aware that other passengers in the gate area were watching this interaction, curious about what was unfolding. Claudia Morrison continued, "As part of our investigation and disciplinary process, Ms. Ashford has been asked to apologize to you directly. I want you to know that this is not optional for her, and you are not required to accept or respond in any particular way. Whatever you feel is valid." Then Claudia Morrison stepped aside, and Veronica Ashford was standing directly in front of Rachel. Up close, without the barrier of authority and uniform, Veronica looked human in a way she hadn't on the plane. Vulnerable. Scared. Humiliated. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat. "I'm sorry for my behavior on the flight today. It was unprofessional and inappropriate." The words sounded hollow. Rehearsed. Like she'd been told exactly what to say. Rachel looked at Veronica steadily. She thought about being angry. She thought about being dismissive. She thought about all the things she could say that would make Veronica feel as small as Veronica had made her feel. But then she thought about her parents. About the values they'd instilled in her. About grace and dignity and using your voice not to tear others down but to build something better. So Rachel took a breath and spoke, and her voice was calm and clear and absolutely certain. "I accept your apology. But I need you to understand something. I didn't do this just for me. I did it for everyone you've made feel small. Everyone you've judged based on how they look instead of who they are. Everyone who didn't have the resources or the knowledge or the courage to fight back when you treated them the way you treated me." Rachel paused, holding Veronica's gaze. "I hope you learn from this. I really do. Because you have the power to make people's experiences better or worse, and today you chose worse. I hope next time, if there is a next time, you choose differently." Veronica's face was streaked with tears now. She nodded, unable to speak, and Claudia Morrison gently guided her away. The security officer and the other airline representative followed, and the small group disappeared into the crowded terminal. Rachel sat back down, her hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. She'd just confronted her bully. She'd spoken truth to power. And it felt terrifying and empowering all at once. "Rachel?" A familiar voice made her look up. Trevor was standing there, still in his flight attendant uniform, his overnight bag slung over his shoulder. He must have been catching a connecting flight too, probably heading home after completing his route. He sat down in the seat next to her without asking, like they were old friends. "I heard what happened. What you said to Veronica. Someone recorded it on their phone." He shook his head in wonder. "Rachel, I need to thank you." Rachel looked at him, confused. "Thank me? For what?" Trevor's expression was serious. "I've been working with Veronica for 8 months. I've watched her treat passengers, especially black and brown passengers, with contempt and cruelty for 8 months. I've seen her make people feel unwelcome in first class based solely on their appearance. I've heard the comments, witnessed the different treatment, noticed the pattern. And I said nothing. Not once did I speak up or file a report or do anything to stop it." His voice was thick with emotion. "I told myself I couldn't risk my job. That I couldn't accuse a senior flight attendant without proof. That it wasn't my place. But those were excuses. The truth is I was a coward. And you, a 12-year-old girl on her first solo flight, you had more courage than I've shown in 8 months. You documented everything. You filed a formal complaint. You stood up for yourself and for everyone else Veronica had mistreated. You're braver than I am." Rachel considered his words carefully. "I don't think it's about bravery," she said finally. "I think it's about knowing your worth and not letting anyone diminish it. My parents taught me that. They taught me that I deserve respect not because of their accomplishments or their wealth, but because I'm a human being. Every person on that plane deserved that same respect, and Veronica was denying it to people based on prejudice and assumptions. She looked at Trevor directly. You staying silent, that wasn't okay. But you also showed me kindness when it mattered most. You apologized. You made me feel seen and cared for after hours of being treated like I didn't belong. That matters too. Trevor smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. You're going to change the world, Rachel Sterling? I have no doubt about that. He stood up, adjusting his bag. I have to catch my flight, but I wanted you to know that because of your complaint, I've already scheduled a meeting with my supervisor. I'm going to report everything I've witnessed over the past 8 months. Names, dates, incidents. Everything. Your courage gave me the courage I should have had all along. If you're still watching, if Rachel's story is resonating with you, hit that subscribe button. Because we're almost at the end, and you need to see how this incredible journey concludes. Rachel watched Trevor walk away and she felt something shift inside her. She'd gotten on that plane as a nervous 12-year-old girl, scared of flying alone, worried about her competition, just trying to get from Boston to Geneva. She'd been subjected to discrimination and humiliation. She'd been made to feel small and unwelcome. But she'd fought back. Not with anger or aggression. With documentation. With truth. With dignity. The boarding announcement for her Geneva flight crackled over the speakers. Rachel gathered her belongings and joined the line. This time, when she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, the woman's eyes lit up. Miss Sterling, we've been expecting you. She spoke into a radio, and within moments, a flight supervisor appeared. Miss Sterling, on behalf of our airline, I want to personally ensure your flight to Geneva is comfortable and pleasant. We've upgraded you to our premium first-class suite, and our entire crew has been briefed to provide you with exceptional service. Rachel felt her face flush. That's not necessary. I just want to get to Geneva. The supervisor smiled warmly. I understand. But please know that what happened to you today has already prompted policy changes. We're implementing mandatory bias training for all staff, improving our complaint documentation systems, and creating better protocols for junior employees to report concerns about senior staff. Your voice started something important. Rachel nodded, accepting the gesture for what it was. An acknowledgement. An apology. A promise to do better. She boarded the plane to Geneva, and the difference was immediate. The flight attendants greeted her with genuine warmth. Her seat was indeed a premium suite, private and comfortable. When the lead flight attendant introduced herself, she did so with respect. Miss Sterling, I'm Elena. If you need anything during this flight, anything at all, please let me know. We're honored to have you aboard. There was no condescension in her voice. No judgment. Just professionalism and kindness. As the plane took off, Rachel looked out her window at the lights of London fading below. She thought about everything that had happened in the past 8 hours. The discrimination. The confrontation. The complaint. The investigation. The apology. The resolution. She thought about Veronica's face when she'd apologized, and Rachel felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction or vindication. Sadness. Sadness that Veronica had let prejudice poison her so thoroughly that she'd hurt people for no reason other than how they looked. Rachel pulled out her phone and opened a new message to her parents. She'd promised to text them when she landed in London. Made it to London safely. Connecting flight to Geneva soon. Had some challenges today, but I handled them. Used my voice like you taught me. Tell you everything when I call from the hotel. Love you both. She hit send and watched the message go through. Her mother would probably have 1,000 questions. Her father would probably want to sue the airline, then realize his daughter had already taken care of everything. The flight to Geneva was blissfully uneventful. Rachel ate a proper meal, reviewed her competition notes, and even dozed off for a bit. When she landed in Geneva at nearly midnight local time, there was a driver waiting for her with a sign that read, Sterling Youth Science Competition. He was kind and professional, telling her about the city as they drove to her hotel. The competition organizers had arranged everything beautifully. A safe, comfortable room. A welcome packet with her schedule. A note wishing her luck. Rachel collapsed onto the hotel bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. She video called her parents, and when their faces appeared on the screen, she felt tears well up for the first time since everything had happened. Baby, what's wrong? Her mother asked immediately, that mother's intuition sensing something amiss despite Rachel's smile. So Rachel told them. Everything. From the moment Veronica had first checked her boarding pass to the confrontation in the terminal to the policy changes the airline was implementing. Her father's face went through several emotions. Anger. Pride. More anger. More pride. Finally he settled on, "Rachel, I'm so proud of you I could burst. You used your voice. You documented everything. You stood up for yourself and for others. That's exactly what we raised you to do." Her mother was crying. "My brilliant, strong, beautiful girl. I'm so sorry you had to experience that. And I'm so proud of how you handled it. So proud." They talked for another hour, her parents asking questions, Rachel reliving details, all of them processing the enormity of what had happened. Finally, her mother said, "Baby, you need to sleep. You have a competition tomorrow. You're going to go in there and show them exactly how brilliant you are." Rachel smiled. "I will. I love you both." "We love you more," they said in unison, and the call ended. Rachel lay in the darkness, thinking about the question that had been nagging at her all day. Had she done the right thing? Had filing that complaint been worth it? And then she thought about Trevor, finding his courage to report what he'd witnessed. She thought about the policy changes being implemented. She thought about all the future passengers who might be spared Veronica's discrimination because Rachel had refused to stay silent. She thought about the message she'd sent, not just to one airline but to anyone who witnessed her story. Your voice matters. Documentation matters. Standing up for yourself matters. Even when you're 12 years old and scared and alone, you have power. The next morning, Rachel woke early and put on her competition outfit. A simple but professional dress her mother had helped her pick out. She braided her hair neatly. She gathered her prototype and her presentation materials. In the hotel lobby, she met other young competitors from around the world. Kids her age, some younger, some older, all brilliant and passionate about science. She made friends over breakfast. A girl from Kenya working on water purification. A boy from Japan developing earthquake early warning systems. A team from Brazil designing sustainable housing. When it was Rachel's turn to present her renewable energy prototype, she walked onto that stage with her head held high. She explained her design with confidence and clarity. She answered the judges' questions with the same precision she'd used to document Veronica's discrimination. She spoke with passion about wanting to make clean energy accessible to everyone, regardless of their economic status. And when she finished, the audience applauded, and one of the judges, an elderly scientist from Germany, approached her afterward. "Miss Sterling, your prototype is innovative, but what impressed me most was your presentation. You spoke with authority and confidence. You defended your ideas with evidence. You showed maturity beyond your years. Where did you learn to communicate so effectively?" Rachel thought about everything she'd experienced in the past 24 hours. "I learned from standing up for myself when it would have been easier to stay silent." The judge smiled, not fully understanding but recognizing truth when he heard it. Rachel Sterling won first place in her category. Her renewable energy prototype was declared one of the most promising innovations of the entire competition. When she accepted her award, standing on that stage with representatives from 40 countries watching, she thought about Veronica. She thought about how Veronica had tried to make her feel small and unworthy. And she thought about how wrong Veronica had been. Because Rachel Sterling wasn't small. She was brilliant and strong and capable of changing the world. So here's my question for you. Have you ever let someone's discrimination or prejudice go unchallenged because you were afraid or unsure or didn't think your voice would matter? Drop a comment below. Because Rachel's story proves that every voice matters, every complaint matters, every stand against injustice matters. Even if you're 12 years old and traveling alone and facing down an authority figure, you have power. You just have to find the courage to use it. Rachel boards her connecting flight, and this time, everything is different. The moment she steps through that aircraft door, she's greeted with genuine warmth and respect. The entire crew seems to straighten up as she approaches, their smiles authentic, their eyes kind. The head flight attendant steps forward, her voice sincere and welcoming. "We've been briefed on what happened. Welcome aboard, Miss Sterling. We're honored to have you." Rachel feels something shift inside her chest. This is what service should look like. This is what respect feels like. She makes her way to her seat, and for the first time since this whole ordeal began, she feels like she can finally breathe. Once she's settled in, Rachel pulls out her phone and video calls her parents. When their faces appear on the screen, she sees the concern in their eyes, and suddenly, everything she's been holding in comes pouring out. She tells them everything. The humiliation, the accusations, the way Veronica treated her like she was nothing. The way she had to stand her ground and fight for basic human dignity. Her mother's eyes glisten with tears, but her voice is steady and strong. "Baby, I'm so proud of you. Not because of what you said, but because you stood up with dignity and grace." Her father leans closer to the camera, his expression thoughtful. You didn't use our name as a weapon. You used your voice as a tool. That's real power. And in that moment, Rachel smiles. A real, genuine smile that reaches her eyes. She's finally at peace. Not because she won some battle, but because she stayed true to herself. She didn't let the world make her smaller. She didn't let cruelty change who she was at her core. Now the aftermath. The ripple effects of one person's courage. Following Rachel's formal complaint, Veronica Ashford was suspended pending investigation. And here's the thing about bullies who abuse their power. Rachel wasn't the only one. Once one person speaks up, others find the courage to do the same. Multiple passengers came forward with similar experiences, each one adding another piece to a troubling pattern. Veronica was later dismissed. The airline didn't just stop there. They implemented mandatory bias training for all staff members. Real training. The kind that makes people examine their assumptions, their prejudices, the subtle ways discrimination shows up even when we think we're being professional. And Trevor Banks? That kind flight attendant who believed Rachel when it mattered most? He was promoted to lead flight attendant and now trains new crew members on respectful passenger service. Because good people deserve to rise, and systems change when we put the right people in positions of influence. But what about Rachel? Rachel Sterling went on to win first place at the International Youth Science Competition in Geneva. Picture her standing on that stage, radiant and confident, holding her award high. The girl who was told she didn't belong in first class is now standing at the pinnacle of international academic achievement. In her voiceover, Rachel reflects on everything that happened. That day, I learned that silence protects the wrong people. Speaking up, even when you're scared, even when you're young, that's how things change. Never let anyone make you feel less than you are. And if they try, document it, report it, and stand firm in your truth. Because your voice matters. And that's the real lesson here, isn't it? Rachel could have stayed quiet. She could have accepted the humiliation, swallowed the injustice, and told herself it wasn't worth the fight. But she didn't. And because she spoke up, an abusive employee was held accountable. Training was implemented. Policies were changed. And future passengers will be treated with more dignity because one 17-year-old girl refused to accept discrimination as normal. Before we wrap up, if this story moved you, if it made you think about your own voice and your own power, hit that subscribe button right now. These are the stories that need to be told. Stories about ordinary people doing extraordinary things simply by refusing to accept injustice. Don't miss the next one. And here's my question for you. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to decide between staying quiet and speaking up, even when it was scary? What did you choose, and looking back, do you wish you'd done anything differently? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your stories matter just as much as Rachel's. This wasn't just about a plane ticket or a seat assignment. This was about dignity. This was about the fundamental human right to be treated with respect, regardless of your age, your appearance, or anyone's assumptions about who you are or where you come from. Rachel Sterling taught us that real power isn't in your last name or your bank account. Real power is in your courage to stand up for yourself when the world tries to make you small. Real power is in your refusal to let discrimination slide just because it's easier to stay quiet. So the next time someone tries to make you feel less than you are, remember Rachel. Remember that you have a voice. Remember that documentation matters, that procedures exist for a reason, and that your dignity is not negotiable. Speak up. Stand firm. And never, ever let anyone convince you that you don't belong.